You're watching BCTV. We're all about Branford. You're watching BCTV, Branford Government Television, a service of Branford Community Television. This program is brought to you in part through the support of the town of Branford.
All right, welcome. We'll call the Board of Selectmen meeting for June 2nd, 2021 to order. Item 1, to approve the Board of Selectmen minutes of May 19th, 2021. Motion to approve.
Second.
All right, it's been moved and seconded. Any edits, corrections, changes? Hearing none. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, abstentions?
I would just be the time to add.
Sure.
Propose it.
Yeah.
It's not on the agenda this evening. However, Mr. Cook wants to make a 10-minute presentation in reference to, I believe you said, saving the town money. I would like to make a motion that we add that to the end of the agenda tonight under, I don't know, make it item 9A or something. Yeah.
Can I ask a question to that? If I have other presentations I'd like to make, do they all have to be put on the agenda the night of the meeting, or can I send a letter to the Board of Selectmen and request that that be put on as an agenda item at the end of public comment?
Let's get this on the agenda and I'll answer that. Okay. So it's been moved by Selectman Dunbar to add a 10-minute presentation by Mr. Cook to discuss an issue of saving the town money. It's been seconded by Selectman Higgins. To your question about having something added to the agenda, as I have stated many times in the past, if there's an item that a selectman feels worthy that should be on the agenda or appropriate to be put on the agenda, then I believe the rest of the board would extend that courtesy to have it put on. So in the future, if a selectman has an item, and if you want to contact any of the selectmen that ask for a certain item to do a presentation, we'll put it on the agenda. And actually, I would add, I prefer that going forward because in the spirit of transparency, I would rather have an item listed on the agenda than to add it the night of the agenda.
That's fine, so I have to ask a question, and I think it's a very relevant question. What's the difference between me, for example, coming in under public comment, using the projector, using my posters, whatever, and what I did for 5 or 6 years under the Ross administration? All I'm doing is bringing visual aids to assist the public comment. That's all I'm doing. Now, why do you have to make a distinction between public comment and a presentation? I don't get
Because to use the projector, I feel, in doing a presentation, a 10-minute presentation extends beyond the part of a public comment section. Well, I assume you're going to want us to move, you're going to want to use this, and others don't have the. So I think we're accommodating your request.
It's accommodated that much. I've seen you sit for 45 minutes with a fellow sitting right here talking about shell fishing in the Civil Islands, and he had 45 minutes. Now, that's not a presentation, that's a public comment, and I saw you do it.
Yeah, I was here too.
Right. So,
and I will say, at that point, he engaged the selectmen, and as I said, that was, if you recall, there was back and forth on it. There was questions that was engaged. So
why if there's a chance, maybe you have a few questions.
yeah, you get 2 minutes. If you can't,
I for 2 minutes. I'll let you go for now.
All in favor, say aye. Aye.
I think it's the content that you can.
Opposed, passing unanimous. Thank you. So that will be added under, like, the bottom of the agenda, just after old business. Item 2, executive session, tax appeals, we do not have any tonight. We'll move on to item 3, to consider and if appropriate, approve a request from Lisa Arpin, town clerk, to waive the bid for the purchase of software assurance for Resolution 3 land records management system and award a 5-year contract to COT Systems at the cost of $12,240 per year, plus a one-time fee of $1,280.
Thank you, Lisa Arpin, Town Clerk, and I'm presenting tonight a renewal of an existing contract with COT Systems of Ohio They are a land record software provider. We've been with them now for 16 years. They served us very well. They've maintained the same pricing now for at least 8 years. I think it's more like 10, but we'll say 8 to play it safe. So their proposal is $1,020 per month. That is software support for land records, dog licensing, vital records, and it also has a provision for verification services for the documents that we do record and index. It's by state statute, it's required that we have an audit of our indexes annually, but they do it on a monthly basis. So that's an add-on cost of $48.485 per instrument or per recording. That's covered in my regular budget line item for land record computer indexing. So that's in the budget item. This particular contract is falling under the IT budget. I will say that there's really only 2 material differences in the contract as opposed to the last contract. So the last contract was a 3-year term, and COD is proposing to increase that to a 5-year term in order to be able to hold their price. And that, as the agenda mentions, there is a one-time fee of $1,280, and that's a sign-on or an interface fee for adding what's called e-recording. So that's electronic receipt of documents as opposed to someone walking in with a mortgage or a deed or UPS or Federal Express expressing in a document. So many town clerks report that they're enjoying about a 30%, up to about a 30% receipt of documents electronically, and certainly with COVID, that would have been a huge help. So those are basically the 2 material differences in the contract. The contract has been vetted by legal counsel and has been approved, and I put it before you to approve the 5-year contract bid agreement.
Does anyone have any questions on this item? One thing, I just picked up on this right now as you were explaining, is technically, I believe, under the financial obligation review statute code, in the town code, this requires Board of Finance because it exceeds $10,000 a year in 1 year. I don't see an issue with it, but we do also have to have them review this. I see it as goes into effect for July 1. They are having a meeting anticipated prior to that date. But if somebody wants to make a motion to continue on,
Make a motion to approve the contingent on Board of Finance approval.
favorable review.
Yeah.
Second.
Been moved and seconded. Any discussion?
Another question I think I can have from here. Why is this another bid waiver? Is there no other company that does this? Is it something that's time sensitive? Is it something that maybe I'm not aware of that goes into bid waivers? Once again, the last time we met or the board met, you had several. Once again, we see another bid waiver.
Yeah.
And then I said, now, why even have a bid process if you're always going to waive the bid?
Thank you, Wayne. So there's a saying, don't rock the boat, or if it ain't broke, don't fix it. What I failed to mention was that we do receive copy revenue from online searches, which more than doubly covers this contract. I have met remotely with other software companies through our town clerk conference that was held remotely this year. We are extremely happy with COP. They are doing a great job for us. If we were to migrate over to a different system, now our books change, the composition of the vault shelving changes. So I'm asking that we continue with this company. Thank you.
Not to be difficult, but, and I understand that, but how does that allow some other company to break in if you're already locked into one because you're so established? Yeah, I don't really understand that. And the same thing with Director Palooza. Well, he looked around. Well, looking around is not putting out a formal bid process. So how do you know there's not something really good out there unless you put out a formal bid process and let people participate?
Certainly, Wayne, if it wasn't a good product, there wouldn't be about 100 of the 169 towns in Connecticut that are on this platform.
Maybe the other 69 is smart.
Well, I don't think we have to debate that on the floor. I think that's been answered.
It's not bad.
Excuse me. Yep, it's a waiver, which is part of the process, as I stated every meeting. So, been moved, seconded, any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor, say aye. Aye. Thank you.
Thank you.
Item 4, to consider and if appropriate, approve a request from Margaret Liberta, Director of Human Resources. I'm sorry, the next one. To consider if appropriate, approve an employment agreement for Assistant Fire Chief Gary Bloomquist through September 30th, 2025. We have HR Director Margaret Liberta as well as the Fire Chief here with us. We have a copy of the contract. If there's any comments you'd like to make with respect to the process of the contract. Gary Bloomquist was appointed Assistant Chief a couple months ago. And the contract is pretty standard in terms of the language and benefits that were granted to others in that position, similar positions. The salary was part of the budget process, as well as this current fiscal year, as well as the next fiscal year has been fully funded, therefore does not require any budget adjustments. Anyone have any questions regarding it?
No, there's really no changes with this from what you presented during the budget season, right? No. Doesn't seem to be.
That's correct.
And this did go through the Board of Finance financial review, and they gave favorable review. Motion to approve.
Second.
Then moved, seconded, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, abstentions, thank you. Item 5, to consider, thank you, Chief. Item 5, to consider and if appropriate, approve a request from Margaret Liberta, Director of Human Resources, to include an additional loan option to the current void defined contribution 457 plan. Margaret?
Sure. Thank you, Jamie. The Voya Deferred Contribution Plan 457 is a voluntary benefit currently offered to all full-time employees, has been for many years. And what we'd like to include, starting this new fiscal year, is to have the employees have an option to take a loan from the plan, it's their money, at 50% of the amount of the total contribution. This gives the employee in emergency or hardship situation the opportunity to borrow their own money and pay back their own money. It's a very common practice, and we feel, I work with the finance department, I feel very strongly about this, that this is a good option for our employees who are in need to be allowed to use their own money in an emergency situation.
Discussion?
No, actually, some questions came to me and I think I answered it to people already. This has nothing to do with union contracts or anything. That's what everybody needs to know. It's not involved, it's just something the town does, and this is just a benefit for it.
Correct.
Thanks.
Motion to approve.
Second.
Then moved, seconded, any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, abstentions, aye. To Consider if appropriate approve a request from our Alberta Director of Human Resources to include an additional Roth 457 account to the current Voya defined contribution 457B plan.
Yes, this is again, another initiation both finance and I would work closely on. We would like to add a Roth plan to our current voluntary plan, 457 plan, to allow employees to put in after-tax dollars, elected after-tax dollars, into their Voya program if they so choose. There's no change in any other aspects of the plan. It's a matter of better financials with some younger people.
Motion to approve.
Second.
The move, second. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All right. Thank you, Rick. Item 7, appointments, Parks and Open Space Authority, Wendy Burton to fill a vacancy left by Joseph Bloomberg, term to expire June 30th, 2024.
Motion to approve.
Second.
The move, second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
You have a comment?
Yeah, but you just step up with it.
Just go ahead. I think you'll pick it up.
You know, one question I have, and I looked at the Parks and Open Space roster, there's all Democrats and I think 2 unaffiliated. And personally, I don't really care what party the person's a member of, but if you look at all of those types of committees, Parks and Open Space, clean energy, coastal vulnerability, a few others out there, they're all primarily Democrats, almost exclusively, and not just Democrats, but far left extremist environmentalists that I don't think serve the town, in a way that a more balanced committee would. And now you even have, and I'm going to say this because I think it's accurate, you're even having these far left people move into economic development. Well, they're not there for economic development. They're there to, promote their own agenda, which is probably somewhat anti-development. So I'd like to know at what point are you as a board of selectmen going to start to look at the balance of committees? Because you go to the Clean Energy Committee, they're all far left, which is fine. My daughter tends to be a little far left, that's fine, I don't get it. But it's nice to have another opinion. They don't even have one. So I don't understand the philosophy, quite frankly, of this board, where you have what I consider to be stacked, truly stacked commissions. And I like the answer to that.
Yeah, as I said many times, for any board or commission, if somebody's interested and would like to serve, to come forward and they want to fulfill the mission
That's not
and
true.
contribute, they can come forward. Thank you.
Excuse me, no, I'm not
You have no comment.
I'm not done, because you have a member of the RTM, James Buchanan, who wants to be on those boards. And you continue to, he's even in your own party, and you continue to turn him down because he's not of that philosophy. So don't say that because someone comes forward, they get it. And that, he's not the only one.
Okay.
No, he's not. I mean, there are other people.
And I would be happy to talk to if an individual wants to talk about their appointment or like,
this time,
I'm more than happy to talk to the individual.
when
and I
it's this time,
discuss it.
you're going to tell them the fifth time you can't serve because you want to stack.
Okay.
You're not the only one.
So it's been moved and seconded. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Amy Bartels to fill a vacancy left by Connie Dronsdale, term to expire June 30th, 2024.
Motion to approve.
Second.
Been moved and seconded. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Pass unanimously. Item 8, correspondence. I don't believe we have any. All right.
I sent 3 letters. You didn't get those either?
I got them, but there wasn't a request to put them on the Board of Selectmen's agenda. They were addressed to the selectmen individually and sent to them.
No, they weren't.
individually.
There were 3 to the board of selectmen, at least 2. I'm almost certain there were 3. There was one about the animal shelter, there was one about the projector and the presentation.
And they were sent to the Board of Selectmen. There wasn't a request to add them to the agenda, so they weren't added to the
The
agenda.
correspondence goes
Okay,
on.
well, we'll take up, if you have correspondence, you'd like it read, we read your correspondence before, and we're happy to read it again. It's
Wait
not
a
in
minute,
the
wait,
agenda.
whoa, time out. No, I want to get this straight, because you're changing all the rules here. In other words, if a citizen sends a letter in, that it's your discretion whether or not you read it?
Somebody said, they said.
Well, that's what Krista just said, it wasn't put on the agenda. Well, why not?
There was a letter sent, and about the projector, I think it was just more
Projector was
informative.
one, the animal shelter was another, I think there was a third, I can't remember what it was. And
Well,
what Krista just said was that you didn't put it on the agenda, why not? Correspondence, the guy in on time, why not?
Mr. Cook, were these the letters regarding FOIA?
No,
This was prior to that?
those were sent to Trista directly.
Correct.
Board of Selectmen was sent to the board, obviously. I thought those automatically, they always have been part of correspondence and read at the meeting.
There's been a lot of correspondence, so maybe it's my
Yeah.
mistake. I apologize. I'm sorry, but there's been, wait, you
All right.
have to admit, there's been a lot of correspondence in the last.
All right,
So-
yeah, do you have the letter on you? I'd be happy to read it. If not, we'll read it next meeting.
I could talk about the letter.
Okay. Item 9.
Oh, the other one too was the Tabor dump.
Okay.
The Tabor dump, and that's a very legitimate issue that I think.
I'm gonna go back and look and see
Yeah.
what,
All right, so
we'll
we'll bring it up
readdress
next
that,
meeting.
hopefully at the next.
All right.
Next-
All right, item 9, any other business?
Mr. Doddsville, yes, I have a concern about my property on Red Hill Road. There are 3 culverts that affect my property, that one goes under the road, and 2 of them go from town property onto my property to relieve water that is drains onto my property. Those culverts have not been cleaned in well over 15 years. They need to be, now the town has in the past taken those culverts and Public Works has cleaned those out. Right now, if you look in those culverts, particularly the one that goes under the road, it is jammed with twigs and leaves and just general debris. And it's been exasperated by the storms that we had in the last summer and the fall. So we are in a situation where now my property is being flooded by water that is being held back because those culverts have not been cleaned out. So I request, and I spoke to you privately about this last month, and now I just want to put it on the record. I would hope that somebody could have those culverts looked at and cleaned out because of my concern about the property, my property being flooded. 1 and 2 is there is a berm that goes between the road and the town property that has the culvert going, open culvert going there. And that berm has been knocked down because of work that's been done on the road. Problems from the water company, the snow removal plows have moved some of that dirt into the culvert, so it's jamming that up as well. That needs to be dug out. And also, when the tree removals took place, there's a bunch of that debris that was pushed into the culvert. So the culvert is full. Somebody with a backhoe or something of that sort, I think, could clean that out relatively quickly. That would allow the water to flow, and all that water flows down into the pond. I mean, that's where it has been directed in the past. And so I request that somebody would look into that.
All right. I will speak to the engineering and public works regarding that. Yeah, I know I did bring it up when we talked a month. I think we may even talk before that one other time you had mentioned.
We did.
Culvert, so.
We did. It's just that it's gotten worse now.
Yeah.
Because, and it's really quite noticeable with the rain that we had the last couple of days. Whenever it rains, it's really pretty noticeable. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Sir, for the record, could you state your name and where you're talking about?
Oh, yeah, I'm Daniel Halley.
Thank you.
I live on 122 Red Hill Road.
122. Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Alley.
Any other business?
As a comment in addition to my presentation, that's all right, isn't it?
Yes.
Couple things.
We're not on 9A yet.
What's that?
presentation is another agenda item, so under, other than
I'd
that.
like to speak on two issues. One is, well, let me bring this one up first. You're all familiar with the First Amendment to the Constitution.
Yeah.
And it relates to your point about a selectman has to authorize or express some kind of interest in a citizen's, item that he wants to bring forth. Well, the last part of it, people remember for religion and speech and all that, but it says to petition the government for redress of grievances. Now, I've said publicly, many, many times to this board, you don't do that. And I think the very nature of the fact that you just said, well, a member of the Board of Selectmen has to okay a citizen's presentation. Let's just say hypothetically that a citizen thinks that an administration is not exactly honest. Let's just say hypothetically. And they want to put a presentation on. Well, do you think any of those members are going to allow that presentation? And is that redressing the grievances? I think not. So I don't know why you have that perspective, that you have that kind of authority over a citizen's right to speak and ask their government to redress the grievances. I really would like all three of you to address that, because that's been a very touchy issue in the last several months. I think if a citizen wants to bring up an issue, that is that citizen's right, and quite frankly, unless they're going on and on and on and on, they have a right to speak pretty much as long as they want, as long as it's productive. So again, I think that's a very legitimate question that speaks right to our Constitution.
Yeah, I think we've stated many times that we're here to do the work of the Board of Selectmen. And that's, if the selectmen, and that's what we act on. These are all items that come before the Board of Selectmen. If there's an item that a selectman feels wants to have discussed, that we would discuss it. There's time, manner, and place. Nobody's interfering with your right to free speech. Again, there's time, manner, and place, and this is the place this is where we're doing the work of the board. So I think it's been very clear, obvious that we allow you to speak. We give you a right to speak on the items.
Not nearly as much as I think you should, and quite frankly, to address your point, when you say, well, it's the work of the Board of Selectmen, that you're conducting here. I don't think there's a more important job the Board of Selectmen has than to listen to the people. I mean, you tell me what it is, I like to know it, and you do not listen to the people. I know one person you don't listen to very much. You're looking at them because you don't want to hear what I have to say. And I don't think that's right. I don't think it's fair. I don't think it's a service to the community. And I said to you publicly, we got kind of heated, but that's the way it is. Just put it out there. You can defend yourself. But it seems lately that, we've been put on, and thank goodness you don't have Zoom, because I wouldn't have lasted quite the tenth of this time. So that's one issue. I don't think you've addressed it, but at least I spoke to it. The other issue is the animal shelter, which was one of my letters, and I'll speak to this briefly. The animal shelter, and I've done research on along with other citizens, is becoming a mess. It's an absolute mess, financially, process-wise, in terms of just the honesty involved. I mean, as I see it, I brought this little chart before, the Board of Finance, and they fortunately tabled it until they got my information. But the question is, are we honestly, or actually, are we dishonestly doing another town project? Because, there are no itemized costs. FOI, as the third selectman said, the itemization for the cost of the building, because it went from roughly 2.5 million to 4.5 million, well, maybe that's wrong, 2.8 to 4.5. And Trista, she's excellent at that, but she sent me back, well, here's the updated information. And the updated information said, okay, the 4.5 represents 400,000 of this and another 4 million that's not itemized. So what does that tell you? Nothing. It tells you nothing. So we don't even know what went into that $4.5 million. And it gets down to the whole issue of this green card. And I call them green. That's exactly what they are, because they don't want anybody in their group but them. And they, behind closed doors, because I asked publicly here and at the Animal Commission meetings, can you make the public aware of any green energy measures you're putting in this building? Nobody said a word. They didn't even go to the meetings. And also, next thing you know, they're clapping at their last meeting, this Clean Energy Commission, because it's gonna be the first carbon zero building, I don't know, in the country, all solar. Well, where did that come from? Nobody told us. We don't know what it costs. And that's open government? Well, I don't think that's too open. And I can go on the list here, but I mean, those are the two main points that I see. Why is this building going up 1.7? I put 1.6, it was wrong. $1.7 million in the original budget. Is that some ploy that they wanted to get it through, and then, as they sometimes do, well, we need a little bit more. Well, a little bit more isn't 1.7 million. That's more than a little. And also, why is this green cult? Well, I know why. But why are they so influential all of a sudden? Where they're basically designing an animal shelter. And the other thing is too, how fancy an animal shelter do we need? We're talking about dogs. You know, I mean, love dogs, but they need a nice building, nice warm building, to feed them and all that. I don't think they need the Taj Mahal. And I think that's what, and I read the minutes over the last 5 years of the animal shelter. You can see it started off like, well, let's do this. And all of a sudden it grew to like this. And there's other things that go on that really, I think, need answers. I need you to be quite candid, I'm always candid. I got nothing against, you know, the fair process, but, you know, they were looking for a fundraiser. So you usher in the town attorney's wife. And here, yes, that's exactly how it read. Mr. Cosgrove brought in Mrs. Anaskovich, and she got a job there for like 7 months or 8 months doing the fundraising. And then they said, well, you know, maybe we got to make this a little bit legitimate. So they put it out to bid. Well, by that point, she was already established. And not only that, but they even said in the bid process, well, she's done so much for us already. And once again, we get back to the whole thing, that the waiving of the bid. So that was suspicious. I'm not saying she's not talented. I think she's enormously talented. I'm not saying she didn't deserve it. But was that really a fair bid process? And this is the kind of stuff that when people look at the way you run this government, goes on all the time. But most people don't, because they're worried about mortgages and their children and everything else. You can't blame them. You don't have a newspaper looking over your shoulder. Certainly, the opposition party is, I don't know, let that one go. But nobody looks at what you guys are doing, except me and a few others. And what you're doing is wrong. It's very wrong. And I think we seriously have to look at this animal shelter. I was 1,000% behind it. Now I can't believe what's going on. And Chris was mentioned, and I'll finish with this, that you have like, what is it, like 7 or 8 FOIAs because of the influence of this green cult. You know, and where did they come in? And how did they get so important all of a sudden? Why is it only them that makes these decisions? Somebody weighs in with them. I think those are all fair questions. Incidentally, I'm wearing my mask. I got my little chemo pump on. But I just want to say this, and I mean this sincerely, it's just kind of aside. Everybody get a colonoscopy. Do not be stupid like this. Get a colonoscopy. Because the last 6 or 7 months has not been, let's just say, the best of my life. So that's that.
Okay, I do just think, you know, we're usually typically with public comment, we'll hear the comment, but in this animal shelter project, and the process and the numbers will be discussed at an upcoming Board of Finance and then RTM. And that's where the discussion will take place. But I just feel for the public that's here, as well as those who are watching, to address a couple of things in terms of the information that is provided. First of all, the committee that was referenced as far as having influence doesn't have authority over it. Things were discussed at those meetings. That's under the purview of that committee. In terms of the design, that was a design team that was working with staff and other stakeholders with the project. The budget, as I said at the Board of Finance meeting, the budget was set by the design team that was working on it based off of a conceptual plan. And from there, we engaged CM and went out to a public bid, which the project is divided up into probably 30 different bid packages, which I believe are all available to the public at this point. So those bids are available to the public. Secondly, as I stated, and we'll hear more about it from the team, but as I said, when I first when we had the bid results, I think, as everybody questioned, how could the number go up so much? It's important to note that when the project received unanimous support from the Board of Finance, and I believe from the RTM as well, that the project has not changed in scope or scale since that time. And according to us, the same information that is available today in terms of the design of the building was available up into there's no new information. That's what was bid, the market is telling us that's where the numbers are coming in right now. You have to have an understanding of the process. You have, as I said, probably 30 different bid packages. I think we had over 100 responses to those. I feel that there's a number of contributing factors. We're all aware of what's happening in the market. There's inflation, there's labor issues, there's to get materials is very difficult at this time. It's not just this project, that's being seen across the country. That all plays a part, and I think you could probably also say, looking at the number, perhaps in developing that budget off of the concept, maybe the design team missed the mark on that request. That's happened before in other projects in this town and outside of this town. That does occur. So like I said, I think there was a number of contributing factors. This discussion will take place where it belongs, on the Board of Finance, the RTM, those who need to appropriate the funds. And getting back to the process, why I think, you also have to remember, these contractors are submitting a price that they need to hold for 30 days, or up to 90 days before they even have a contract in place. So we're all seeing the volatility of the market. Plus, once they have a contract, I think it was an estimated 10 to 12 month construction period. So you're talking over a year of when they're projecting out, and with the volatility. So I think everybody needs to, recognize that, take a step back. I feel strongly it's still a good project. However, we need to look at the financial aspect and how that will be addressed. And that discussion will take place at the Board of Finance.
I listened to what you said, and I agree with some of it. But the part I don't agree with is that, we haven't seen the numbers. And I've asked for the numbers through the Freedom of Information, and they come out very vague, very in lump sums, that you can't even compare one to the other. So when you say, well, the volatility of the market caused the lumber and construction, everything to go up, well, fine. Will show us that was the case, and it wasn't all spent for solar. For example, to invoke the Board of Finance and the RTM, like they're going to really do a thorough job on this, I think is almost laughable. I mean, I follow those two groups a lot. I'm not saying that they don't put time in, but they don't look at these things carefully. They really don't. I mean, and I've watched it for 12 years. I think that, you ask most people on the RTM what the issues are about, I think probably, I'll be generous, maybe 7 out of 10 to tell you. Or not, 7 out of 10, I'm sorry, 3 out of 10 to tell you. Because they don't know. They don't know the issues. I mean, the citizens know more of the issues than they do. So you can't say, well, the RTM's going to take care of it. No, they won't. They're just going to vote what you tell them to in caucus. That's all they're going to do. So let's just call it straight. Listen, I'm all for the animal shelter. If you want to make it solar, light up the sky. But the point is, show us what you're doing. That's what we're asking.
Okay, and then that's what I said, but I think it's a part for the design team to point out.
Well, where were they up until now? Where were we until now? I haven't seen anybody. I haven't seen
That's right.
architects.
The architect was involved with the appropriation. The CM came in after.
First elected.
But we don't have, let's talk about
I'm just
that.
saying, they went behind closed doors and they came out with a project that was $1.7 million over budget. That's all I see, because I see nothing else pointing to anything.
Okay, well, we'll lay out the process, just also for the record. And again, we'll move on to item 9A after this. But the only solar that, the photovoltaic that's on that building is the hot water heater, which were donated. The rest, it was going to be purchased through, if solar was installed, it would be through a PPA which similar to we're doing on other buildings.
They were all clapping the other night, it was gonna be like all solar, they even had to put up more roof lines to put the extra solar on. I mean,
Again, we'll hear from the president, because I don't want misinformation getting out there, and that's what's happening. A lot of information that is just, not inaccurate, it's just false.
I can firsthand say, as someone that's in the middle of a project at my home, that the cost between the beginning of COVID and now has doubled. And that's on the generous side, because they bought the lumber or put in for it earlier. So costs have skyrocketed. And so I think a project that size, I think you're gonna find that there's even a lot more of that unfortunately happened because of COVID.
nobody mentioned this during the budget process, nobody did, better be careful, because these prices are skyrocketing, nobody said anything. And that wasn't that long ago, was it 3 weeks ago that they were finally, so I mean, somebody had to see something coming, and he didn't.
Okay, item 9A, to hear a presentation, Mr. Cook.
I don't know if you want to stay there, or if you can move to the side, I don't know.
Yeah, just project, right? Well,
Just watch your back, watch your
Thank you. Oh, wait, whatever the other.
you said on the side on there, interesting.
That's fine. Thank you very much. Come on, I'm not afraid to sit next to you, come on.
Thank you.
You're not gonna give me nothing, right?
Thank you.
Also Navy and you're the Navy man. I love it.
Okay. This is an idea that has come from a number of citizens, and basically born out of the need to, I think, bring accountability and transparency to the government in town. Boards like the Board of Finance, quite frankly, I don't think there's anything surprise coming from me. I don't believe that they do answer to this question at all. And certainly not the ones that are difficult to answer from their perspective. For example, in the RTM, 5 citizen petitions and 6 citizen letters went to their all vital issues placed on the RTM agenda, but they were all categorically ignored. And no action was taken. And these were important issues. Parkside, Tabor, Costco, but they just bounce them back and forth. Nobody takes it seriously. So what we're proposing, again, to the second lesson point, save a lot of money and a lot of aggravation in this town, is an Office of Government Accountability and Transparency, where you have a full-time staff that's responsive to citizens' concerns, that has access to, independent consultants and professionals. And the goal is, quite frankly, whether you think one exists now or not, to ensure a fair process and accountability. It comes off of the traditional role of an ombudsman, which is an independent community, individual or information source with investigative capabilities that will provide answers to citizens' questions. Again, an ombudsman is an official charged with investigating citizens' complaints against improper government activity, especially that of public officials. So, to the point of how much money could this save, and what could it have prevented, and what concerns could it, now address? Well, in the last 20 years, dishonesty and corruption, in my opinion, and I've studied it closely, has cost Branford taxpayers tens of millions of dollars. Tens of millions of dollars. When you look at Tabor, Costco, a $50 million project, and even now at Parkside, $5 million, $4.5 million unaccounted for. You start adding those numbers up, and it's a lot of money. Starting with Tabor, I don't think I have to remind too many people about this. With former Selectmen Ross and his town attorney, Penny Bellamy, they were called dishonest by the Connecticut Supreme Court. They cost this town $20 million for a budget, basically a $4 million piece of property. Vindictive taxation, cost of the lawsuit. I said it many times. If you want that fellow determining your tax, so determine ours. You and I would have a little discussion. And this is always great. This is always good government. This is Alice Lambert from the RTM. You think the ombudsman would have something to say about that? Like, maybe that's not the best behavior for an RTM member to be displaying. Corruption, censorship, and civil rights abuses have characterized, quite frankly, the past two Branford districts. For an example, probably first and foremost is Costco. So I even have to tell you what happened to Costco with Diana Ross and Dan Shapiro. Diana Ross being the inland wetlands director, and Shapiro being the commission chairman. They basically just committed fraud. They took the independent peer review and they doctored it so that Costco would be denied. There's no argument about that. And they had help, from their pals and Branford Citizens for Responsible Development. You see Penny Bellamy, she's up there again, she documented documents and papers. She did the same thing in Costco. She pretty much took Diana Ross underneath her arms and said, I know how to do this, and all the rest of the crowd there. And there it is. It's the last version of the independent peer review, and Diana Ross's writing is all over it. What does she have one single letter on that independent peer review for? And then the first Selectman goes, don't worry, we got it covered, we'll investigate it. But no investigation was ever enough. We never saw one 5 years later. That's just one issue. Other issue is what's happened down in 146 and all the flooding down here when the land trust took out the burn, flooded the Medlin property and all of 146. Nobody was responsible for that. Not one single public official. They all went down there, but nobody did anything. And ignoring the southwest of Atlantic Walk and all the demolition debris there. Is that ever been addressed? No. Well, maybe an ombudsman could help. Maybe an ombudsman would look at it and say, let's look at this a little more closely. But again, there's all kinds of stuff down here that's not unaccounted for. The $13 million I call community house lot process there was disgraceful if you really looked at it. And what did we get for our money? We got the pink area. That's the only part of the building footprint that changed. $13 million. We built this firehouse for $13 million. This whole thing. And that's what we got for $13 million. That's it. That's a $13 million addition. I know there was other work done, but maybe an ombudsman could look at it and say, these citizens have questions like Mrs. Goff. She was very vocal. She did not do what she said she would do about citizen participation, and nobody listened to her. The housing authority, that's a joke. I mean, it's getting a little better now, but what they did down there was missing $4.5 million. And the ombudsman might look at that. So the chairman of the Board of Finance, he won't have to answer questions, doesn't answer mine. He just looks at me and says, we'll take it under advisement. Well, maybe you need an ombudsman. Same thing with these special funds all around. $100 million in town money in special funds, and I guarantee very few people know where it is. And they shuffle it around like, one day the Board of Finance put $6.7 million from one fund to the other, and they didn't even tell the RTM, which is their chartered obligation to do. And you see them, the special funds. There's 3 of them that amount to close to $75 million. And there's a $6.7 million transfer. We don't really have a process to examine legal fees. I'll try to speed up 8 to 10 minutes. And again, it's refusal by the chairman to answer questions. Dressing Bluff, that's still going on. I don't know what's going on down there, but it's still going on. And again, you got a real conflict of interest between, once again, the town attorney's wife. She's involved in that. The town attorney's making a bundle representing the town. Well, ombudsman might answer a couple of citizens' questions. And here we go to the green color. What is the green color? Well, I already told you. It's far left environmentalists that have political influence over the first selectmen. They only believe in man-made global warming, obsession with open space, and stopping development except where they want it to go. And do they look familiar? Yeah, they look familiar. They're all basically, in that cult, and they are a cult. And then what the first selectman has taken on himself to do is he just rewards them. Like, well, here's the commission, here's, Tabor property, here's a sustainability director. We don't have an economic development director, but we have a sustainability director. You go figure that one out. And he just rewards them because, quite frankly, I think he just wants their votes. Look at the Tabor property. He's given away 77 acres, $20 million being given away for hiking trails. And the most brilliant thing is putting the Shoreline Greenway Trail right in the middle of the whole 77 acres. I mean, what does that do? It just basically renders that property useless for any overall development. What genius thought of that? And it cost us $500,000 between the state and the feds to do it. And again, the first selectman is authorized, he has no authority, that's the RTM's responsibility. And again, you have this ad hoc energy committee, incredibly biased. they tried to sneak through a town plan of energy, that was only what they didn't ask for anybody else's input. We have a corrupt town plan. I explained that, I think it's on TV now. We went through the whole thing with the, planning and zoning. The whole thing is corrupt. It's all basically outlined and formulated by this Green Code. One of their big accomplishments is super zone. Now they're next to 53. They can put anything they want. And why? Because they're putting everything at 53. They keep it away from 56, which is kind of near and dear to me, because they want to protect their little village down in Stony Creek, even though they're 3 miles away from 56. And then we talked about the animal shelter, another thing there. $1.7 million over budget, citizens concerns in Florida. I don't have to go over those, we already did. Then we have smaller issues, like the town signs being removed. I would like to go on to the ombudsman and say, Mr. Ombudsman, you think it's fair that they're taking down my signs, but everybody else's signs get to stay where they are? And I mean everybody. And he said, no, it's not very fair. And then you got an issue like, the propaganda minister of this town, Steve Maddox came into Branford 7, very good friends with the first selectman. Here they are paddling around everywhere. And he just lies. He just lies and lies and lies, and I wish he was here because I'd say right to him. All he does is lie. And some people believe him. Well, that's not good for the town. What happens to honest journalism? And again, what we saw lately with the Zoom was just terrible abuse, starting with the selectmen, the majority leader, Ray Abraham. They just muted people. If they didn't want to have the people say, things about them they didn't want to hear, but they just muted them. It's like we were in some third world country. That's exactly what it was. Why did this occur? Because nobody's watching. Nobody's watching the first election. Who's watching it? RTM, Joe, forget about it. We have no press, and citizens are too busy living their lives. No checks and balances. Really, there's no checks and balances at all. You have a weak opposition party. And all this leads to is really a lack of fairness, accountability, transparency, activity, stability, and honesty in town government. So what can you do? I'll close with this. Well, we can open up an office of government accountability and transparency, which I think would be a really good idea. I think it would give people a place to go and ask questions and get a fair answer. Or option 2, which doesn't seem so far out of the question now, is to consider an alternate form of government. I mean, maybe, and I think it is, I think our form of government is broken. I think if you have a first selectman that thinks he can do whatever he wants and an RTM that allows him to do it, what kind of government is that? So I think that serious consideration at some point should be given to perhaps the town manager, town council, or alternative form of government. That's the presentation. I got through it pretty quickly. The whole point being, and this is to the second selectman's point of putting this on the agenda in my request, this would save us tens and tens and tens of millions of dollars if we just had better government, if we just had more accountability, if we had more transparency. But so much gets through the cracks because nobody's paying attention, and it's really a shame. And I'm going to tell you something. My family's been here, certain parts of it at least, for as long as the town's existed. And I'll be honest with you, I was legitimately, for the first time, ashamed of this community because I think we have that bad a government. And I'm sorry if it offends people, but I've done my homework. And I'll say this, the first selectman's grandfather said it many times, but it's one of my favorite lines of all time. So you want to get rid of Cook? Prove them wrong. Well, nobody's done it yet because, like a lot of other citizens, we do our homework. I'd like you to consider the idea of an ombudsman, and I think it may go a long way. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for that presentation.
You agree with all of this?
No. And I would actually offer to any individual, the public, or anyone who'd like to, speak on any of these issues, I'd be happy to talk to you. You often invoke my words of my grandfather, if you want to get rid of them, prove them wrong. you know, I don't think, nobody's trying to get rid of you. If somebody's interested in hearing the other side and actually have a discussion, I'd be more than happy to meet with you anytime and talk about it. Obviously, I think there's a lot of things that were not only mischaracterized, but I just think patently false. And, but you had the opportunity to do your presentation.
Well, let me say
In
this
the
real
future,
quick.
there's another, would you like another presentation?
Anytime you like. I hear you, anytime you like, you and your pal Matt to the game, and even your pal Dennis Bowles, I'll take all three of you on. Anytime you want public TV, I'm ready. But those are not false statements. Everything I said is true. Everything I said is true.
Well, like I said, feel free to contact me.
Well,
I'm
true.
available at town hall, be happy to be there. An open door policy, very transparent and open. With that,
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Second.
it's been moved, seconded, all in favor, say aye. Aye. Thank you, everybody. Have a good night.
This program was brought to you in part through the support of the Town of Branford. Watch town meetings and other videos on demand at BranfordTV.org.